Okay, well, thank you, Jared, for being here.
Absolutely.
I know in the family court system, we hear a lot of fathers feel like there's a bias towards them in the court system. And what I'm hearing is a lot of dads say, hey, the moms are the ones that are getting the kids. The moms are the ones that the court favors. And then on the other hand, I've heard plenty of moms say, no way, you're kidding me. Like, I'm the easy target. Dad has more resources. Dad has better attorneys. And so there's kind of like this almost battle within a battle. And well, you're a single dad, and I have you here today. And I would love to hear your experiences being the single dad in family court. And my first question is, how long have you been involved in the family court system?
My older daughter will be 22 in November, so 20, 21 years in that neighborhood.
21 years. And have you been in it, I guess, since she was a baby?
Yeah. She was not even one when we started down that path.
Okay, so take me back. Let's go back to that and tell me how that started, what your experience was, and we'll get to how it is now.
Well, at the time of my daughter's birth, we were kind of struggling in our relationship anyway. So it was important for me to try to get things on paper about what would happen if we broke up. Call it a weird version of a prenup. We weren't going towards marriage. What eventually happened, we were going towards breaking up anyway. And trying to get some things on paper while we were still at least communicating well. So tried that path. It didn't go very well quickly.
Did it not go well because you were both trying to do it together, or is this something you were doing on your own?
We weren't agreeing on things, and it was very quick that I figured out that she wasn't agreeing with the things that I wanted, and so good communication dissolved quickly.
Okay. And then so what happened from there?
So we ended up in court. Obviously, the relationship was severed. We ended up in court. I started on my own, pro se with no attorney, and went in. I was young. I was 21 years old at the time. I had talked to a few attorneys with a little bit of advice, but once I saw what they were charging, I couldn't afford it. So went into the Licking County courts and started trying to go down the right path. I wasn't trying to get full custody. We were trying to find something that would be happy in the middle. That didn't turn out well either. It got very heated very quickly.
So you say it got heated. How did it get heated, and why didn't it turn out? Was she represented?
At first she was. Yeah, most of the time she was. She bounced through a lot of attorneys. A lot of it was her tactic. She's very good at using the system. So she would change attorneys and get delays and show up without an attorney and then get another continuance. And that happened a lot. So it was very frustrating because you never knew who you were trying to communicate with because the attorneys would always change. Our communication broke down quickly. We didn't agree on a lot of things. Most things, I'll say, we didn't agree on. Once we got in the courtroom, it seemed like it was a lot of let's just throw mud at Jared. And I could tell very quickly that the court system wasn't on my side.
Why is that?
After I think the second time we were in court, we had a magistrate decision that was as if he wasn't even in the same room. I ended up paying all the money to get the transcript from it, was able to point out several inconsistencies with his decision and the transcript from the day in court, and I appealed his decision. It went up to the judge above him, which then the magistrate's decision got overturned. That set the precedent for me to never get a ruling in my favor again.
Just because you felt at that point the magistrate was so upset about his decision being overturned by a higher court that he had something almost personal against you?
I believe so, yeah.
And then this whole time you're going unrepresented. Are you communicating with the attorney for the other side, or are you communicating at all with him? Because normally attorneys one talks to the other and they talk before you go into court. So is that what you were essentially doing? Since you're representing yourself?
I would try, wouldn't get very far because, again, 21 years old, not represented, not versed in the court system at the time. That communication didn't go very well either. Meanwhile, trying to co-parent, trying to communicate with my ex, that wasn't going well. Having a decision overturned by the judge didn't help myself in the courtroom with the magistrate at all. I think the next time I went back, I did have an attorney with me, and it started the long line of decisions that were ruled against me. And even when the opposing counsel said, "You've got that nailed, good job," and come to find out, nope, everything was ruled against me.
So what was ruled against you?
I mean, absolutely everything. And unfortunately, a few years later, I had a second child by another mother and was stuck in the same courtroom. So I felt there was a lot of bias in that second case because we were in front of the same magistrate.
Right.
So everything from visitation schedules to, the parenting agreement had a 50-50 for bills, for medical expenses, extracurriculars, things like that. At one point, I remember with my younger daughter, I showed up with a stack, everything the court would need, payment proof, explanation of benefits, bills from the doctors, all this stuff, insurance paperwork, all of it. I can't remember the exact number, but I think it was north of $7,000. And, I was unrepresented at that point again. Had gone back and forth so many times. Sometimes it was just easier to try myself instead of throwing money at an attorney when I'd so many times gotten ruled against. With or without an attorney, it didn't really matter. So let's try it without spending the money. And at that point, the magistrate said basically, I had tried to read everything into evidence the best I could. I had a spreadsheet set out with every single thing that I was presenting in that document or in that packet. I had my ex read into the record a few of the larger documents and testify that she didn't pay them, testify that she did receive them, testify that she had no reason why she didn't pay them. And then the magistrate's ruling was basically, you handed me all this and said, you figure it out. So I'm going to not rule in your favor on any of it. So I lost all of it.
Did the magistrate have time before you went into court? Did you submit those to the court before you went in? Did you bring your stack of paper when you went into the court, or what did that look like?
I wasn't able to present them as evidence before the court. It wasn't set up that way. It was evidence to be presented in the courtroom.
Okay.
The court knew what the motion was brought that we were going to be hearing that day. There was no opportunity to submit this as evidence beforehand.
Okay.
I don't even think I got asked by opposing counsel to share it beforehand. It was just walked into court and present your evidence.
And so you presented it, and then she presents her side or her case, and then what happens from there? Was it a long hearing? Was it the magistrate just listened a little bit to each one and made a decision, or how did that go?
That one wasn't particularly all that long because her side of the story was, no, I didn't pay it. That was it. There was no reason. It was just, no, I didn't pay it. Yes, I received, there was proof of emails sent. There was proof of letters sent that were sent with signature proof. So she definitely couldn't say she didn't receive them, the bills and notification. So her reasoning was she didn't pay it because she didn't pay it. So it wasn't a particularly long day in court. And then I never had a judge or magistrate rule right then and there. So it was a couple of weeks later, we'd get the magistrate's decision. And like I said, he basically said that I didn't present my evidence correctly. I gave him the information to, in his words, sort out himself, figure it out. And so he gave me nothing.
And so it sounds like she wasn't even really fighting you in court. And she admitted, yeah, these things were given to me. No, I haven't paid that. And so at that point, what was the magistrate's decision? Why was it? What were you going in for? And then what was his decision? Because it sounds like it was definitely maybe a bit of a biased decision. It's not really making sense why.
It was a contempt hearing, contempt against our parenting agreement. And so I was asking the court to order her to pay me my half of what her half would have been, that $7,000 number. So it was $14,000 worth of bills that I was presenting, and her half was unpaid. And basically his decision was no, overruled.
And you had already agreed upon splitting the money.
Mm-hmm.
And then you go in with all the proof showing you've paid your half, she hasn't paid hers.
I paid all of it.
You paid all of it.
She was supposed to pay me back half of it.
Oh, gosh.
So the bills were in my name. It was my, doctors and insurance and things like that. So I was responsible. I was the responsible party for the bills. So I had to pay all of it. And then I was supposed to get half back from her, which I never did because, again, he ruled in I would say he ruled in her favor, but basically he overruled my contempt motion.
So then what happens from there?
That was just one of many examples, and that's with my younger daughter. I mean, there were ex parte motions thrown around that didn't go anywhere but interrupted my parenting time. And again, interruption of parenting time, so I didn't get my visitation with my daughter. I didn't get my time. Cost me money in attorneys, or if I went by myself, days off work to go into court to fight, that then they would get dismissed and I'd get everything back. It was a very big cycle of doing that a lot. It got to the point where I couldn't parent either of my children because, both of my exes were playing off of the same playbook because they were in communication a lot. And they teamed up against me a lot, or I think they would give each other pointers to, hey, try this, hey, do that, and if you're going to go in court, do this thing. And so it got to the point where, they would threaten to take me to court for anything or call the police for anything. So I wasn't even able to parent my children the way that I wanted to.
Because it made you fearful, it sounds like, of what their response would be, what they could accuse you of, like what made it so hard? How was it hard to parent your children, and why?
Oh, the accusations of police, of children's services, of court, of losing visitation time. It was easier just fine, abide by what you want so I can see my children. I would fight when I had to. When they would throw false allegations, I would go into court and do everything I had to. To a certain point, it was just that, merry-go-round. We were just going to go around and around again. Here we go. Let's do this again. It got very repetitive, and you could see how things were going to go, especially when you knew you'd go into a courtroom, and I already knew how things were going to turn out. Even if I brought the most ironclad case, usually I wasn't going to get ruled in my favor.
So it sounds like they're kind of almost a little bit working in tandem, maybe at times working in tandem, and you're in the same courtroom with two different people, the same magistrate. And so these motions that they're filing, were they, like, what kind of motions were they? Were they just kind of like nonsense? Was it trying to get you to stop seeing your daughters? What kind of things were they filing in court? And then what was the magistrate's response to them?
Most of the time it was nonsense. We'd get in an argument, and next thing I know, there's an ex parte emergency custody motion filed where they would try to stop my visitation and stop custody and 100% custody to the mother, and I'd have to go in and fight it. And usually it was so flimsy that would get overruled, and so everything would get brought back to where it was. But again, I'd have to go fight it. It was that, even if I would say that was ruled in my favor, it really wasn't. It was just their side getting dismissed and everything getting put back to the way it was.
So that's interesting. So sometimes even bringing in a motion, nothing would even change. It would just go back to the original orders that were there. Yeah. And it's just everyone's out of money, way overstressed, and time was taken away.
Yeah. When my youngest daughter, when her mother and I finally made it to court, so when she and I split up, she ran out of the state for almost a year. It was just under a year. By the time she got back to Ohio and I got her into a courtroom, things moved relatively quickly. But this was, 15 years ago. But we ended up getting a guardian ad litem, which we'd had a few here and there with my older daughter, so I kind of knew how that process would work. That guardian ad litem said that my ex was the least trustworthy person she had ever had to deal with in her time as an attorney. Put it in writing, brought this whole presentation together in her report, basically ruling that I should be the custodial parent. The magistrate disregarded that. It wasn't until I escalated everything in front of a different judge that actually everything changed, and I ended up with full custody of both of my children.
Wow.
And then, it wasn't a great time in my life. I went through a divorce. I ended up getting a DUI. My exes teamed up again, went right back into the courtroom, and apparently, having an issue like that is enough that I got my custody stripped away.
So explain to us what guardian ad litem is.
So the guardian ad litem is a court-appointed third party, supposed to be completely non-biased. Usually it's an attorney. Sometimes it's a counselor. There are other people that can be them, the guardian ad litem. But they go through the process. They interview both parents, grandparents if they're around, close family members, and then they'll start going down the process of teachers, counselors for the child, friends of the child. They try to get a big picture, a third-party objective picture of what that whole process is and what the family life looks like. They'll do an in-home inspection of both sides, making sure that you have appropriate homes, food, cleanliness, clothing, toys, all the necessary things. And then their job is to basically put together a report. Usually you'll have a questionnaire to fill out about all of that information, about yourself, about your child, about your financial stability, job, all that. And they'll put together an entire report that they then give to the court about their decision of what they see from what they have seen.
Okay, so it sounds like it's a pretty lengthy, in-depth process. And how many guardians did you have?
My oldest daughter had 3. My youngest had 2.
Wow.
And they were all attorneys.
Okay.
Yeah. One of them, her ruling was, or her opinion, I should say, wasn't a ruling, was that she couldn't make a decision. So that got completely thrown out. All of the money that we had to pay her was wasted because she couldn't even make a decision. The last one that we had, actually, I believe, fell asleep in the courtroom at one point. I don't know what his situation was. He was another. I had to correct a few things about his opinion, and I was able to do that by showing differences in what I even wrote in my questionnaire versus what he wrote in his report. But that didn't really go very far. His report didn't really get taken into consideration much anyway.
So you said his opinion. Where was his, in your mind, where was his opinion coming from? Because it sounds like it's more than an opinion. If they're going through teachers, grandparents, kids, friends, parents, all these people, then what was his opinion, I guess, and why was his opinion thrown out by the court if he did all this thorough research, or did he do it?
I don't know how thorough his research was, so I guess I'm using opinion. It's their recommendation, and it's up to the judge or the magistrate to go with the guardian's recommendation, and usually they do because they've had a lot more in-depth time to the magistrate or judge isn't going to come walk through your home. So they rely on guardian ad litems to do things like that and have interviews with schools and all of that. In that particular case, that guardian didn't really do a great job of investigating, and his opinion or his recommendation wasn't really thorough, so it wasn't really followed that much, which seemed to be the case several times. I even got almost kind of a gag order, if you will, about the previous guardian that said all the negative things about my ex because that got shared with a few people, and I was told I was not allowed to share that information. I even tried to present that in court when we got to the judge above the magistrate, and they tried to object. And actually, that judge allowed me to submit that as evidence because it was part of the court record.
So it's part of the guardian's report, but you weren't allowed to share it?
Correct.
So then what's the point? Did the magistrate at least see the report, or
Yes.
the judge see it?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
But you had to work hard just for the judge to be able to see what the guardian's report is, even though the guardian was assigned by the court?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yep.
And so let's go back to the other guardian who fell asleep in the courtroom. So that guardian was also assigned by the court.
Correct.
But then his recommendation was thrown out by the court.
It wasn't specifically thrown out. It just wasn't really followed. You know?
So I guess
the
my
favorite
question,
word, the favorite word they like to use is I'll take it under consideration. You know, I'll take it under advisement,
Okay.
and they're going to take it back to the chambers, and they're going to re-review everything, and then they're going to write their opinion. So he's looking at the bigger picture of what we testified, what evidence we brought, what the guardian looked at, things like that. So it's up to that judge or magistrate to put it all together and figure out what their decision is going to be.
So I wonder, and this is just me thinking out loud, if you get a report from a guardian and it's just looked at like we're not going to look at this recommendation whatsoever, like at what point should, and you could probably help me answer this, should the magistrate or a judge say, hey, it looks like we need a new guardian on this case? Would you say that that was fair in the situation, that it would have been better to have a different guardian, or would that just have added to the stress going through all these motions again?
Both. I definitely feel like there needs to be more guidelines as to who can be a guardian, because I think you'd get better results from the guardian, and thereby the judges or magistrates would look at those recommendations more closely. But it would also have added, at that point, we're in the courtroom for our what would have been at that time our fourth final hearing. You know, it happened all the time. They would get reopened and closed again. So we'd gone through all the days in court, all of the background information, all of the investigations from the guardian, all of that, and that was kind of our day to present everything. So if at that point the magistrate or judge had said, well, we need a new guardian, we'd have had to start the process all over again and incurred another bill, because not only, you know, again, on and off, I was paying attorneys, they were paying attorneys, we're paying court cost on this, and now we're also paying a guardian.
It's a lot.
So yeah, it became a lot. And, you know, it's unfortunate that not everyone can get a guardian appointed because they can't afford to get a guardian. When you get to a certain point, you really need that. But it's even more disheartening when you do pay the money for a guardian and their recommendations are not necessarily thrown out, but completely disregarded.
So you said that there is a point where you do need a guardian. So there is value with a guardian, but you also said a few minutes ago that there should be guidelines
Absolutely.
on who can be a guardian.
Absolutely.
So what are those guidelines in your opinion?
It would have to be a very specific person that has some a legal background, whether it be an attorney, somebody that has some, not necessarily mental health, but counseling type background, so that they can talk to the child and they can talk to people and have more experience in whether it be being able to sift through and who's being honest and forthcoming, who's hiding things. You know, it's a very specific role to play. And so it's not just, you know, you're not going to pick just anybody to do it. Unfortunately, usually it's attorneys that do it, and they're good at communicating with the court, but they may not be the best at some of the other aspects.
So that's why you said, unfortunately, sometimes an attorney is a guardian, and maybe you're thinking that that's not always the best idea for a guardian. Did a guardian ever talk to your kids?
Yes.
How did that go?
Well, I think all of the guardians at some point talked to everybody, including the children. All in all, I don't think it was bad. I don't think they had a bad interview or interaction with the children. Some would be, you know, in the attorney's office, which is a little stiff. Some would be out in public. We're going to go for ice cream, and Dad's going to take a hike for a few minutes, and making sure the kid feels comfortable and knows that everything's safe. And then I would walk away and things like that. And, you know, part of it was seeing how the children would interact with me and how the kids would interact with their mother. So they would do interviews like that with both parents. So, and that kind of goes back to either training or specific backgrounds on being able to see the children's reactions. You know, you need some kind of child psychology in there to know, Is this child acting this way because they're told to, or because they genuinely want to?
That's interesting. It's almost like not just even listening to their words, but like watching body language and seeing how they respond.
Absolutely.
Yeah, that's interesting. So you're saying that it didn't necessarily hurt the kids at all as far as, emotionally or psychologically, but it was necessary?
Well, necessary probably. Hurt the kids specifically, no. In a world where more than 50% of marriages end in divorce, I'd say sadly it's becoming the norm where you're having custody fights, and so it's less and less frequent that you still have the two biological parents in the home, whether one gets remarried or whatever. So it's becoming more accepted when a child says, "Well, I've got to go talk to a guardian, or I've got to go talk to an attorney," or that's not something that a child should have to deal with.
Right.
Unfortunately, it seems to be happening more and more often.
Becoming part of their language and they understand it, which is pretty wild.
Right.
Since we're on the topic of kids, one of the things that you hear at court say all the time is best interest of the kids. So I'd kind of like to go down that path and say that's always their goal, is what is the best interest of the children, and then making decisions according to that. So what are your thoughts on best interest of the kids? Did you feel like that was taken into consideration? Did your kids benefit from that, or what are your thoughts there?
I like what you said, that that's always their goal. You'd like to think that's always their goal, but a lot of times it doesn't seem that way. I can say I really don't think that that was taken into consideration a lot, unfortunately.
Why?
Both from both of my ex's side, but also in the courtroom, by a lot of the decisions that were made, even against evidence that was presented, or just blanket, we're going to rule against Jared no matter what. Even when opposing counsel thought that I had it, my attorney, I remember my attorney liked to say, I don't have a crystal ball, but we did very well here, and we'd still lose. So they're not taking into consideration even the evidence presented when two attorneys, the opposing attorney being one of them, said that you did well here, you've got this one. If that were the case, then you'd think by the evidence presented, by doing what's best for the child, by what they're supposed to do by the letter of the law, you'd be able to see the outcome, and it would always come out the other way. So, which tells me they're not really looking 100% at the best interest of the kid.
So how have you seen, let's say in your case, you're saying that wasn't always the case, but interest of the kid was not always taken into consideration. Sure. So how did that affect your daughters?
Oh, my oldest daughter couldn't stay in an extracurricular activity because every time, I'd put her in dance, soccer, choir, sporting activities, Girl Scouts, all kinds of different things. Something would come up, whether it be a random ex parte order, or another day in court where custody was in question, or even just at one point, her mother completely disregarded the court and the custody agreement, and it took me 4 months to get her into a courtroom to actually enforce what we had written. And again, they didn't punish, they just set it back to status quo as it was before. She would be pulled out of every extracurricular. So now, 21 years old, she's trying to discover what she likes, because she wasn't able to be that creative kid. She wasn't able to stick with sporting activities or extracurricular activities, or, any of that enrichment that like you and I had, so that we know what we like as an adult. She's trying to figure that out now as a young adult.
So if you have her, let's say you put her in a soccer league or, choir, it usually lasts for a few months.
Right.
But if she's taken out because you have this emergency hearing that doesn't necessarily happen right away, then she missed that whole time of being involved. Was she not able to go like 1-2 weeks times, or is it just she just missed out completely? Oh,
she would miss out for the entire time. Her mother wouldn't take her. Or even when we were doing fairly well and I put her in an activity, she wouldn't take her just because it was an activity that I put her in. So I wasted the money, I wasted the time. I wasted the time of whatever activity it was by she's going to be involved, and then a couple weeks in, she's not any longer. But once you miss a certain amount, they're going to cut you. And that happened to her a lot. Whether it be sports, dance, whatever the case may be.
So that's one of my questions too. Why was she pulled out of it? And you just mentioned because it was you that got her involved in the activity. Is that what it was every time? Or was it because there was too much running around for the other side to have to do, pick up, drop off? What was your kind of thought with all that?
You'd have to ask the other side. I think, in my opinion, a lot of it had to do with spite. I'm not going to do it because he put her in it. Some of it was laziness. I'm not going to get in her car and drive her there because I'm not going to do it. Some of it was control. I could speculate a lot of different reasons why. In the end of the day, she didn't get taken. So she would end up getting too far behind on whatever the thing was, or missed too many of the events and activities, and so they, would remove her. And then I wouldn't want to do it again until she came to me and asked me, I want to do this. I want to try that. Sure, let's go. And it would cycle would happen again.
So then when that would happen, if she came to you and said, hey, Dad, this is something I really want to do, you sign her up, you pay for it, and then all of a sudden she's not going, how do you explain that to her, and what was her response to it?
She knew. She was with it enough to understand. When I'm with Dad, I go to my activity. When I'm with Mom, I don't. And when it got to the point that she would be removed for not going, she knew. She's just, I didn't go enough with Mom. Yep, and I would try to keep it to whatever her opinion was, and not give her more information and speak ill, which I don't think was reciprocated on the other side, but of both of my children. But it was a tough conversation to have. You're looking at a kid who wanted to get involved in something and then couldn't.
And that's heartbreaking for the parent, knowing your child wants to do this.
Every time.
And it gets blocked, it gets stopped, and they miss out.
Absolutely.
And so now she's almost 22.
Yeah.
And still trying to figure some of these things out and what she wants to do. And yeah, that's really tough.
Yep. Yeah, it's very tough. And I try to guide her. It's different now. She's not in elementary school or middle school where, okay, let's try all of these activities you have. Now that you're an adult, she's going to school, she's got a job, she's got a boyfriend, she's got pets, she's got a life, but no enrichment, no extracurriculars because she missed out on it as a kid. So if she tries to figure out something that she likes, it's not as easy as an adult, as I'm sure you know. You don't have time to go to all these things. I used to laugh talking about it when I was a kid. My mom, single mother with an only child, had a minivan, and people were like, why? Well, you'd open up the door, and in the back was all of my uniforms, karate and Boy Scouts, and and soccer, and all the things that I would have were right there in the back of the van. So I could go from one activity because I was able to do that.
Yeah. So you said you were raised by a single mom.
Yep.
So can we dive into that a little bit?
Absolutely.
Okay. So did she completely raise you? Did you see your dad?
I have very few memories of seeing my father before I was about 15. So it was my mom all the way.
Wow. And where was he?
Columbus. I was in Newark, so not very far.
So just hanging out, just didn't care? Like what like have you reconciled? I could just keep going into this one, but have you reconciled?
This is a whole different topic.
Just go ahead and let me know how all that worked.
So as I'm sure you can imagine, it tough for them to talk about, with me especially. From the things that I've been told or been able to put together, he was a police officer. She was an ER nurse. They went on a couple of dates. Oopsie, here I am 9 months later. They weren't really in a long-term relationship situation. There were a few back and forths about, are we going to get married? I don't think so. Things like that. And they went separate ways. I know there were some times where they were in court, back in the 80s, and there was some child support exchanged, $200 a month. But for the most part, he stayed away. And I think that was his choice more than anything. I know a few times he would say he was going to fight and take full custody, and he never did, or he never tried. It wouldn't have gone very well, basically, if you looked at the track record of him never seeing me, never knowing anything about me. I remember one time he showed up around Easter. My birthday's at the end of March. He showed up around Easter with some gifts, and it was a shirt that was a brand that I would never wear, and it was 3 sizes too big because he didn't even know how big I was. Some other random things that like I don't have any interest in any of this stuff. I don't know what. Okay, thanks, whatever. I got about 15, 16 years old, and I wanted to find out if I had family, brothers, sisters, cousins, nieces, nephews, uncles, whatever. Come to find out I had a very large family that I kind of got to know for a few years. And then as I got older, things kind of drifted. I would get my biannual phone call from him saying, it's been about 6 months. How you doing? Still here. I didn't really feel very loving or forthcoming, whatever. Let's see, about 7 years ago, went through a stream of he and all of his brothers passed away within about 13, 14 months of each other.
Oh, wow.
So I got from 15 till, 7 years ago, 7, 8 years ago, something like that. So mid-30s to know them. Then after all of that happened, everybody kind of moved away and out of state. And my grandmother was the matriarch of the family. And so when she passed, everybody just kind of drifted apart. I haven't talked to most of them since then. So we're coming up probably close to 10 years since I've talked to most any of them.
Yeah. So that's interesting. So you were raised by a single mom. And then, you understand the struggles of just a single parent is hard enough as it is. So you were raised with that. And then it sounds like you were just the complete opposite of what your dad was. You wanted to be extremely involved, which is interesting because I think you could probably see like both sides of it, why it's hard for single mom, but then like you're a single dad who wants to be involved. Yeah. And it's a completely different story than what you were raised with.
I'll say from what I saw growing up, and I'm sure this was just my, as a kid, view, it wasn't hard for my mother because my father was just absent. He was gone. I'm sure there were struggles. I'm sure it was hard. She just didn't let me see it. She did an amazing job, even though I turned out this way. No. She did everything, and I I wanted for nothing. I got to do all the activities and all the things. Mm-hmm. To go to the second part of what you said, I saw in my experience with lack of a father something that I never wanted to be, and unfortunately through the court system was forced to be that. I practically was forced into being an absentee father for the most part, at times in my children's lives. There's so many what you'd call deadbeat dads out there, and unfortunately, when you have a dad that fights tooth and nail day in and day out, loses time, money, job, sleep, health, everything, because all they want to do is be a part of their children's lives, and they can't because the court system prevents it. That's criminal.
Yeah. And I'd like to talk about that. You've really been through it with the court system. You've been through it for 21 years, which is wild. And so just real quick to kind of recap, have you ever had a time where you weren't involved in the court system? Like, did you have maybe like 5 years where everything was maybe going okay, and so you weren't in court? Or has it just been this constant flow for 21 years?
There have been some stretches where I wasn't. I don't know, 5 years, probably not that long. Now is probably one of the longer times that I've been without, only because at this point, my older daughter is almost 22, my younger is 17, and I swore to myself I would never stop fighting, but at a certain point, that being said, when do you wave the white flag? Enough is enough. I'm going to lose every time, so why am I going to put myself and, more importantly, my children through it? Mm-hmm. My younger daughter at this point has been so influenced by her mother and so controlled by her mother. All I can do is wait and hope that she sees things eventually that, I wasn't the perfect father. I tried very, very hard. But not everything that she believes about me is true. Mm-hmm. And so, what do you do? Mm-hmm. I even signed paperwork to allow them to leave and move to Florida because her mother has a child with some special needs and health issues, and there are like 3 places in the country that he can get the proper care, and one of them is in an area in Florida. And I said, go, fine.
Wow.
I hadn't seen my daughter in far too long at that point, and she lived not even 20 minutes away from me. What's a 2-hour flight? And, I was hoping that showing that gesture would help the situation. At least she would see, like, I want what's best for you. I want you to do what you need to do in your life.
Mm-hmm.
It even strained the communication even more. Mm-hmm. So, like I said, I'm hoping that when she gets away from her mother, gets out on her own, grows up a little bit, maybe looks back over things and sees maybe dad was telling the truth, maybe dad wasn't as bad as my mom told me,
mm-hmm.
then we can try to have a relationship, but by that point she'll be, 20s, 30s, something, who knows, and I'll have lost all this time with her, the important developmental times, the children times, the times where a daughter needs a dad.
Mm-hmm.
And, it's something that I have to think about and consciously push back every day,
mm-hmm.
every single day.
And it sounds like the word frustrating doesn't even begin to describe this situation, and maybe it's closer to heartbreak than it is
heartbreak is a great way to say it. I don't think a thesaurus would give me enough words to come up with the right feeling. And that's, at this point, it truly has been half of my life fighting for my children. And to get constantly beaten down, constantly ruled against, even when you should be winning. At one point, the magistrate was so upset that the police officers let me back into my own apartment with my ex to get some of my belongings, that he was going to press charges against the police officers, which nowhere in his jurisdiction to do that.
The magistrate was going to press charges against the police officers for letting you back into the house to get some of your stuff.
Mm-hmm. Because if you want to say an unbiased opinion, that was not one of them. They were supposed to be neutral, was not. But try to get put into a different courtroom. I don't know if it's different in other counties, but in Licking County, it won't happen. It's the good old boys club. It's the handshake deals, and it's the way it's always been, and so nobody wants to go against it.
And this is the same magistrate whose decision got overturned by a higher judge, so he kind of felt a vendetta a little bit against you.
I believe so.
Yeah.
I think it was more than a little bit, and had a lot to do with that first interaction, but didn't get any better going down the line.
Mm-hmm. Do you think that if you had not appealed that and that it wasn't overturned, do you think in any way he would have been less partial?
I believed that possibly at one point. But as I've gotten further in through all of this, there are online forums and Facebook pages dedicated to fathers that have been ruled against from him.
From this specific magistrate?
Correct. Yeah.
Wow.
It's a well-known fact, and it's not just me. There are forums of people, of dads talking about it.
Do you know if there's ever been complaints filed against him? Formal ones?
I personally haven't. I don't think they would go anywhere. Again, Licking County is a very good old boys sort of situation. I don't know.
So if you have Facebook pages and forums for people coming together, and these are all dads saying the same thing?
Yep.
Wow. That sounds like there's a problem there.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah. Okay, so with seeing that there is possibly a very real problem here, if you could, let's say, snap your fingers, or if you had the ability to change, let's say, 1 to 3 things in the court system for it to be more just, unbiased, more within the best intentions for the kids, what would you do? What decisions would you make?
The first thing I would do is put term limits on magistrates. Judges are voted on. You could either vote on your magistrates or only allow them to sit for certain terms. Then it's time, just like I think we need to do with the government, we won't get into that, term limits. Only let people sit for so long. Mm-hmm. Or if they get voted back in, fine, they can stay a second term, put some sort of a limit on how long they're allowed to sit so that it helps break up the good old boys club. You're getting new faces, new opinions, new people in. I think that there needs to be a training course or some sort of more strict guidelines as to who can be a guardian, but also be able to make that more accessible. Whether it be some sort of funding assistance somewhere down the line, because like I said before, you're paying your attorney, they're paying their attorney, you're paying court cost, and now you're splitting the cost of this guardian that most of them are attorneys, and they're they're not necessarily making what they normally would on the hourly rate, but they're not charging a cheap hourly rate for this.
Mm-hmm.
So now you add that third expense in there, but that doesn't always get followed. It's not always the best representation. So having more education and guidelines put together for what they should be doing and what certifications they should have, qualifications they should have. As much as it's a parliamentary system and you have judges and attorneys, gone are the days of the white wigs. Sometimes it's just necessary to have a conversation. And you can't really do that very well in court. Everything has to be, jeopardy in the form of a question. And I think that they do what's called an in-camera interview, which has nothing to do with a camera. It's taking the child into the judge or magistrate's court office and having a conversation with the child. I really think that it would be sometimes appropriate to have not necessarily even off the record, they could record it, but a one-on-one conversation with each party, each parent, with the magistrate, not in a courtroom setting, not with an attorney asking a question that you have to answer and going down that regime, that strict schedule, regiment. But being able to just open up and actually speak, you can't get the feelings out that, like, how passionate you are for your children, and all I want is what's best for them, and all I want to do is take care of them. And I've fought for half my life and lost, I won't even say lost, but spent so much money to lose in court over and over and over and over again.
Mm-hmm.
When you then sit down with the other side and can see how disingenuous they are and how emotionless and how the venom and hatred is just towards me, they're not putting the children first. You could see that much more blatantly just by having an open conversation, interacting, rather than opposite tables. Here's your attorney asking questions and, cross and recross and, it can't be the whole time, but having that as something to be done, I think would go a long way.
That's really interesting because that's kind of what the guardian does with the kids is they have the one-on-one, the talking, like we talked about. They can see the body language. And so I think that's a really fascinating solution is to have parents one-on-one with the magistrate, record it, don't record it, whatever.
Right.
But I think that's really great because, like you said, it's just let's have a conversation instead of being in court and you have your suit and tie on and everything's just so rigid.
Right. And you'd have to keep it away from a, bash the ex situation. But there would be some relevant conversation about things that have gone negatively. But I think that, whether it's a judge or a magistrate or even a guardian, if their recommendations are followed more strictly, you'd be able to really see how genuine someone is and where their focus really is, and if it's on hurting the other parent or taking care of the child. Mm-hmm. It would become much more obvious with an open conversation rather than an on-paper questionnaire or a back and forth with attorneys in a courtroom, something like that. But also, like I said, I think doing something for term limits, getting somebody new in the courtroom, somebody that's going to be able to hear it, even if it's in the middle of your court case. There's court records. You can see everything in the past. Mm-hmm. It's just, you can change an attorney halfway through. Why can't you change a magistrate or a judge halfway through? Yeah. Unfortunately, well,
good point.
Magistrate so-and-so is gone now. Magistrate this person's in, and they're going to be proceeding over the rest of your case. Mm-hmm. Great.
So the magistrate can just sit there until they decide to retire. they don't have to be, like you said, voted in as the judge does. The magistrate is just there until they don't want to be.
Right. And there's nothing you can do about it.
You just have to sit through it.
Right. And you can you can file a motion to change venue, and it won't go well. You have to have very specific reasons to do it, and you have to be able to prove that they've been biased towards one side, or if you have to be able to prove things. And apparently even showing a slew of decisions against one side, very one-sided, that's not enough.
So it sounds like maybe the only way at this point anyways to show a bias is all these groups that are coming together saying this one magistrate, yes, is showing bias. That might be the only way to even get heard.
You know, they're doing great things by helping each other. I don't know that their voices are actually being heard by the people that matters. And again, you know, how do you get a magistrate that's sitting on the bench until they decide they want to retire out? You know, whose job is it to remove them? Is it the higher court? Is it the judge that sits above them? How do you get the word to that judge or to that higher court that there's a real problem here? And again, like I said, these are all online forums. So unless this information gets presented to those appropriate people, they're not seeing it.
And so it sounds like a lack of accountability on the magistrate's part, and it's frustrating because you don't feel like you can get past that. There's not much to do.
There's no real checks and balances, and if you do check like I did, the balance gets thrown in. It's not supposed to, but in my case, it got thrown in the opposite direction. You know, everything from then on. Once I checked that system, and the person above said, "No, he's right. You didn't see this correctly," and overruled his decision. Everything got done after that. Everything got taken the other direction. So.
But then you've had all the other years of the exact opposite of not being able to go to the judge and just sitting before this magistrate with whatever decisions get made.
Yep.
Yeah. Yeah, that's frustrating.
Very.
Well, I appreciate you being on the show, and there's always still hope for your daughters, you know?
Never give up.
Yeah, I believe that.
Yep.
It's good. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah.